So if you'll indulge me, this is our big moment, actually. So welcome. The plan is to do an hour session, 30 minutes briefing you and then a 30-minute Q&A at the end. And this is our very first ever VIP supporter briefing. And by VIP, what we mean is the people who have gone above and beyond to support us, some financially, some through expertise, some through just generally being good eggs and giving advice and help and whatever else. But you're all part of our inner circle. And part of that deal is that we will give you the exclusives before everybody else. You'll get the news, you'll get the opportunities, you'll get the invitations to the events, everything that you would hope to get from us showing you a bit of love. And the big reveal that we're going to be doing tonight is on our conservation activities. So you may have seen a bit of the press work that we've done or the website, but we've been deliberately guarded and quiet on all of our conservation activity to date, because little fish being little fish, very fragile, and we wanted to make sure that we got a success story to tell you rather than just selling you a promise. So the purpose really is to show you how your support has directly benefited wild carp. And by wild carp, we mean feral carp or heritage stranger carp. These are UK fish. So if we use the term wild carp tonight, that's what we're talking about. Because as a charity, we are here to look after these wonderful, beautiful old strains of carp beyond everything else. We have other goals, other objectives to promote, educate, make people fall in love with them, care about them, look after them. But principally, it is about giving these fish a safe future, either in their natural wild environment out there or in protected environments. And so the big news and the big image that we want to share with you are these little things, these beautiful little wild carp that are the first fish that we have grown as part of our conservation program, our breeding program this year. They were taken as eggs from the wild in June, put into a dedicated facility at a fish farm and grown on professionally into the lovely little creatures that you see here and now. And they're the first tangible evidence that we've got to be able to share with you to say, this is how you've helped these fish, not just the wild carp trust, but these fish particularly. And what we would like to do in the next half hour is tell you the story, their story, of how they came to be. So if you've got a notepad and you've got questions, write it all down and we'll answer them at the end. But the story of these little fish goes as this. Back in March, I think it was, we were forming the charity. We were looking at who we were, what we are, what we're about, building the website, going out with initial PR, building the constitutional documents for the charity, which set about what we're about. We were also thinking about how are we going to go about conserving these fish, because we're all rank amateurs, in honesty, of conservation or fish farming or anything else, but we're genuinely hugely passionate about them. And one of the questions that came up was, well, which fish would we go to first, and where would those come from? And the waters that sprang to mind immediately were Linguin in mid Wales, known wildy water, stocked by the monks in the Middle Ages, very nice strain of fish, lovely lean fish, and very old. The second one was Pantaclin, also well-known wild carp water, just south of Linguin, high up in the mountains. Slightly different looking fish, a little bit shorter, squatter, but again, wildies. And the third was Chillingstone Castle in Kent, which had we knew an old strain of fish, but we weren't that familiar with them. We knew the water, but we weren't intimately aware of them. And so we settled on the first two waters to go and have talks with the owners to see if they would donate any of their fish. And you'd think that would be an easy job, but by word, it was not. And I have to say, we had a rapid learning curve on how to approach waters, how to go about conservation, how to even consider moving these fish, let alone putting them in a facility. And a lot of that learning was linked to the paperwork around moving fish, particularly from one water to another water that might be on a streamline or likely to flood, so those fish could get out and move elsewhere. And the gig, if you do it by the book, which you obviously would do, is that if you are to take one fish from one of these waters, you have to kill 30. You have to put 30 fish to the fish to have health checks done. Admittedly, only 5 have to be of the size that you're going to take. Another 10 have to be just of the species, and 30 can be anything else. Now, we didn't really like this. A conservation charity is not about killing fish deliberately, wild fish. And some of the waters that we thought about, not the ones I've just mentioned, but other ones, actually didn't have 30 fish in them at all. So it was kind of a non-starter. And just as we were starting to lose a bit of heart, Theo Pike, who is on the call tonight, hi Theo, said, have a think about what we call ARC projects. So Theo's got way more conservation experience and fishery, I was going to say fishery management, but certainly loving for and caring for rivers and making sure they're in good health. And he said, have a think about ARC projects where instead of taking adult fish from the wild, you take eggs or fry, and you can take hundreds of thousands of those. You know, an adult fish, 100,000 eggs per kilo. You can get an awful lot of fish for the effort, or at least that was the plan. And so that was our change of tack. So we then had a chat to Keith Elliott, who runs Classic Angling magazine, and I was telling him about what Theo had said, and he said, well, this is exactly what the Avon Roach Project's done. Have a look at what they've done, get their book. And if you haven't got the book, you must get the book. It's brilliant. And Trevor Harrop and Budgie Price had identified that the Avon roach were fewer than they had been before. They were getting predated by cormorants. The recruitment of the young fry wasn't as it was. And they took it upon themselves to get eggs from the wild and grow it on, actually in the back garden, but in dedicated tanks and then in stock ponds. And we thought, well, how inspiring is that? And the book was genuinely inspiring. If they can do it, we can do it. And at the same time, we got really lucky. So we wrote to a guy called Hugo Kidston, whose family have owned the Glanwy estate in Mid Wales for, I think, centuries, certainly a long time. And that is the estate that owns Pantaclyn. And just for clarity, there's a common misunderstanding that Pantaclyn's on common land. It isn't, it's on the Glanwy estate. And Hugo was only too pleased to help us with our conservation activities. So a huge thank you. He had hoped to be on the call tonight, but he's traveling with work. And he absolutely agreed with the new approach or logic to take eggs and fry, so minimal disturbance to the adult fish, minimum reduction in those fish so that it's a fishery, anglers aren't going to have fewer fish to fish for. And particularly from his family's perspective, they were delighted in the thought that their very precious strain of fish had a more secure future. So if anything horrible happened to the water, there would be a backup stock of these fish to then restock the water if it had to be. They were also very proud and very honoured to think that their fish could go and be the first into the conservation programme and then could be used to seed other conservation pools. So huge thank you to Hugo. If you don't know Pantaclyn, it's one of the better known wildcarp waters. Certainly in the past 20 years, it's been on TV. There's been magazine articles written about it. It's in the Apint mountain ranges above the Brecon Beacons, high up, about 1,400 foot up. But it's a very exposed water, both to the elements and to the risk as well. Now, I'm hoping it's too high up for otters to trot up there, but you never know. It certainly has clear enough waters for cormorants to be a threat. But we have noticed a change in the fish's behaviours in the past 2 years. We think as a direct result of the lockdowns. So the water is now being more frequented by wild swimmers, paddle boarders, general folk who are getting out in the countryside because of the lockdowns. And the fish's behaviour, whereas before you could go and see them all in the edges and they'd be happy as anything, are now tightly balled up in the middle. And the only time I've seen that behaviour is with trout fisheries that have a predator problem. Now, it being an exposed water, again, heightens the priority and urgency for us to help it. So yes, we want to try and make sure that that lake itself is looked after and cared for and perhaps policed, but the fish themselves were very timely that they should be the ones to enter the conservation program. And these are the fish. This is one of those fish that was caught on a fishing trip. They slightly different shape to some of the wildies, a little bit squatter, slightly pointier head, but a very old strain. They became known, fairly well known in the 40s, and then in the 60s with the slight spin-off, I guess, from the specimen angling group, where people started getting into wildies. So those in the know knew of the water in the late 60s, certainly in the 80s, and then into the 90s it was being written about, and then more recently it's become quite well known. So we had the water, we had the fish, we had the owner's permission. We then wanted to make absolutely sure that we had all the necessary paperwork to do what we were proposing to do. Given that the foundations of the charity had to be right, we didn't want to get accused of any wrongdoing. So first of all, we registered the fishery with CFAS, so they knew about it, knew where it was, and we, as the Wild Carp Trust, became the operator, officially approved operator of these activities at the lake. So that was a brilliant result. We also got approval from Natural Resources Wales, which is their equivalent environment agency, to move eggs and fry, and particularly use those instruments other than rod and line. So we had permission from the owner to use rod and line and move them. We also got permission to use crayfish traps, hand nets and minnow traps. And that was renewed throughout this summer. So we still have a renewal of that license. So we had the source of fish, the means to get them, and then what do we do with them? So, you know, we're mostly fishermen. Step forward, Mark Stockton, who runs Fishery Equipment Limited, or he's one of the main guys who provides aerators and things to fisheries. Absolutely brilliant guy. And he said, have a chat to Ben Cornick, who owns 5 Star Fisheries. And Ben, absolute genius at fish farming, and he his particular strain of carp that he has hand selected and bred have gone over 50 pounds, but they are from quite a nice old strain. They're not the sort of faster growing, shorter lived varieties. Beautiful fish. And he had a particular interest in what we were doing. One was to conserve the heritage strain. He also had a fascination in how they're going to grow, because there's this perennial debate amongst fish farmers that there's no such thing as a wildie. It's just a stunted common carp, and put that fish in a really rich water and it will grow the same as others. And Ben is really keen to monitor those growth rates over the next few years to see if that's true. And you know what? We don't care. It might prove the rule. It might disagree with it. It doesn't matter. We are really keen to see how these little fish do. So with Ben's advice, Ben had said, by absolutely supporting what Keith and Theo had advised, go and get eggs from the wild, because you'll get potentially hundreds of thousands of eggs as opposed to 1 or 2 fish. And then by putting them, or fry, and then by putting them into his controlled environment, there wasn't the need to kill fish as well. You only need that permission when they go into the next water. So odds being the odds, it's far better to give 30 fish for health checks when you have 100,000 to begin with than it was from taking them in the wild. So end of May, beginning of June, we were all set, all the paperwork, knew what we were going to do to go up that mountain there to Pantaclyn. So Pantaclyn sits at the top of that mountain. It sounded like an easy task, but if you look at where Pantaclyn is there in mid-Wales, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, which is probably why the wildies are there. We as trustees live all over the country. but you'll see that there are 2 dots closest to Panticleer, and the closest one is Matt Tanner. Matt's one of our founders. He's been with us from the beginning, and he lives at Landrindod Wells, which is about 8 or 10 miles from Bilth, where Panticleer is. And so Matt was going to be our guy on the ground to visit every day if needs be. And Ben had advised, catch them spawning, and then you've got a couple of days before the eggs hatch. So we figured, okay, as long as we're there every 2 days, we're going to get eggs, but ideally we want to be there every day. So Matt, bless him, did the hoik up there every day. And on I think it was the 5th of June, spotted the first signs of spawning. And he got really excited at this, seeing these fish moving and potentially spawning. So much so that he had a heart attack. And we as a committee, we felt really bad. We weren't sure if it was the excitement of all this hanky-panky or whether it was him having to hike over the moors to get to the lake every day. But he became very ill with this heart attack. And by no means a joking matter, we were desperately worried for him. He's man down, but he's our mate. He's a friend. So while he was in hospital, we took over, and Pete, and I should say Matt's fine now, by the way, and it was nothing to do with these fish that caused it. But while he was in hospital, Peter Whip took over and did the 2-hour round trip to the lake every couple of days. And what he also did was, inspired by the Avon Roach activities, we decided if we could put some substrates down in the edges or in amongst the weed, we might get lucky and the fish might spawn on them, and then collecting the eggs will be a lot easier. We can just drag these Hessian sacks out covered in eggs, and we've then got loads. So Pete and I went up there, we laid these out all around the edges of the lake in the hope that we would see some eggs, not knowing, of course, that carp eggs are so tiny and so translucent you'd have no chance of seeing them on them anyway. You can't see them underwater. But what happened with the Hessian sacks, they got covered in like a brown algae and didn't really look that appealing to us or the fish. But the good news was that there was a sudden bloom of weed, and which was very attractive to the carp. So you can see one of the adult carp there in it now. And it was giving us a plan B, because Intel had said the carp there spawn in the 3rd week of June. It's high up, so it's about 2 or 3 weeks later than a lower water. And we thought either the Hessian bits are going to wash clean and be fine, or the weed's going to get thick enough to attract the carp up into the shallows. So while this was happening, Pete was laying out the Hessian sacks. I thought, I can see a few pin fry in the margin here. I'm going to just get the net out and have a mooch around. And turned up millions, billions of these little fry. And I got super excited, thinking we've just got lucky here. And took these pictures and sent them to Ben to say, I've got carp. And he immediately came back and said, mate, those aren't carp. I said, they are. I've Googled it. They look exactly like carp. He said, they're not, I tell you now. They're probably minnows. They might be chub, but they're more likely to be minnows. And it could have been the result of that spawning you saw a couple of weeks ago. So now Ben's view was the fish that Matt had filmed may have been chub spawning. Okay, and what he gave us advice was, as a fish farmer, he knows that carp actually spawn at night, which perplexed us, because as anglers, we've often seen carp thrashing around in the daytime and spawning, but really it's a bit of foreplay and they're not really putting down the eggs. So he didn't think it was carp. So these fish, as much as I got excited, are not carp fry, I'm told. They were probably minnows. So we went to plan B, which was the minnow traps and the crayfish traps. And we've baited these with bread, and we put half a dozen out along the margins. And we were genuinely gobsmacked at the number of fish that we caught. Not a single carp. We thought we might have got some of it last year's spawn, but we got nothing. We got billions of minnows. And it became a bit of a joke, because it doesn't look like there's many in that net there, but on some pull-ins, that whole crayfish trap could be filled to the top of minnows. And as a conservation organisation, our first reaction was, well, if we want to help these fish, probably the best thing to do is get rid of some of these minnows, because they're going to gobble everything up. But we didn't. Instead, we had a bit of a competition to find who could catch the most. And Pete was getting loads, I was getting loads, and in amongst them were some absolute whoppers, huge, enormous minnows that, I mean, admittedly, that one's spawn bound, but they were record-breaking minnows. But there were millions of the things. But we'd been up there for several weeks, there every day, every 2 days, netting, checking the Hessian sacks, no carp, not a sign of a carp. So the plan 3 was, we just need to be there for when it happens. We're confident that although we had a warmish spring, it had gone a bit cooler, there were no further signs of spawning. So we thought, okay, perhaps they will be spawning third week of June. So we booked Pantyclin for a week. So it was the first 3 days of the fishing season and the first 2 or 3 days before. And we found a campsite at the bottom of the mountain, so we could be there and be there every day. And because it's not possible to be there at night, we would be there at the crack of dawn to see if any spawning activity had happened. I got there first, I think, on the Monday, and the rest of the guys turned up on the Tuesday. And we got lucky on the night of the Monday night. So that was us there, ready for it to all happen. This was the Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, where I'd got there and I saw the carp in the sort of tail ends of spawning. I think looking at the state of the weed, most of the activity had happened during the night, and these were the last few, still having a look at it. And so I was there, super excited, thinking all I need to do is wade out there and just gather up all this weed, and it's going to be covered in hundreds of thousands of eggs. When they'd moved off, I went in, had a look. I couldn't find hardly any eggs. I was absolutely gobsmacked, hardly anything. And I did find 3 eggs. And on that picture, I think you can see all 3, maybe 4, 6 actually, just off the end of my thumbs. And they look like this. They're tiny, they're pinhead size. You can feel them quite easily under your fingers. When you run your fingers along the weed, you feel them quite easy, but you can't see them underwater. And so we'd got 3 eggs, our first 3 eggs. And we were kind of excited that we'd got something. We got something in the bag. What we'd hoped to achieve, we'd got, but it wasn't many. We then noticed that the carp had actually moved from the bank where I was, but probably disturbed them a bit, onto the far bank. So I went round there to see what was going on. And I was astounded as I crept closer. I could see the fish spawning, but what was happening just on the edge of that ripple there was a black cloud of minnows about 12 foot wide and about 4 foot deep. And there's 2 other carp in there as well, waiting for the female to release her eggs. And as soon as she did, there was like this mini tsunami of ripples of the fish going in there to eat the eggs. And it was unbelievable. It was like jacuzzi type stuff happening under the water. And I'd read a stat somewhere that says 99% of the eggs don't survive in the wild. They either get eaten or they get a fungal infection, or they're just not fertilized. And this proved it to me that of all those eggs that those fish there had laid, hardly any remained after just 30 seconds. So what am I going to do? So I actually decided I'm going to get in the water and try and shoo these minnows off long enough so that I can collect some eggs, which is what I did. And the carp were preoccupied, so they carried on spawning. You can see one just to the right there. They carried on spawning all around me. I was able to detect immediately where they'd laid the eggs and get in there as quick as I could before the minnows did. And then get in the weed, sticking it in buckets. I then spent 2 hours going through the buckets of weed to find the eggs. And these are those buckets of eggs with some of the weed still attached. I would say I probably got a few hundred eggs, by no means hundreds of thousands, only a few hundred. but I'd got a substantial amount and enough to kickstart our breeding program. The nervousness was, and this picture was taken at about 7 o'clock in the morning, just as my skin's turning lobster. It was incredibly hot. This was 15th of June, I think. And it was 32 degrees by about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. It was so hot that even Tony got his legs out. That's how hot it was. And we started to get nervous that these precious eggs that we got might start cooking in the buckets. We put some aerators on them. We don't know if that made the foggiest bit of difference to eggs, to be honest, but we were nervous that the water was getting hot. We kept the buckets in the water as long as we dared, and then we decided to go back to the campsite and put them in the shade. I'd already decided that wasn't going to be enough. We needed to get them up to Ben's, the fish farmers, now he's 200 miles from Pantacloon, so it's a 4-hour drive there and a 4-hour drive back. So I decided to do the first run, knowing that the guys were going to carry on looking for eggs and using the crayfish trap. So we probably have another run the second day, which actually did happen, and Andy did that run. But this particular run, I was going to get up to Ben's, terrified the eggs might not survive, and also kind of worried about what music I might play in the car in case it influenced them. So it was a bit of Led Zeppelin and a bit of Early Rush, but nothing too loud. So I spoke to Ben on the way up, and he said, "Right, mate, I'm here. It's great. I'll get the tanks prepared, get everything ready. I'll be here when you turn up." And he was brilliant. So as soon as I got there, he took over straight away. He looked at the buckets, checked the eggs, measured the temperature of the water in the buckets versus the tanks. And these tanks that you can see there, they're the ones dedicated to our wildies, and they're in a separate container, separate environment from his stock, so there's no risk of cross-contamination. And what Ben did while we were waiting for the temperature of the water to align was take some of these eggs and put them under the microscope. And this is the very first egg we saw, and it's fertilized. You can see the nucleus, that circular nucleus there. You can see it sort of coming away from the skin of the egg on the outside. And that was our first confirmation that not only had we got eggs, we got some fertilized ones as well. So job was a good one. And I have to say, I had a proper lump in my throat. That was the closest thing to proud dad I've ever felt, because I knew that every single one of those eggs in those buckets, you know, we'd run our fingers across the weed, we'd felt them, we'd touched them, we'd identified them, we'd put them in the bucket, and there it was. And so that's the water going, or the eggs going into the tanks. About a month later, Ben sent us footage of these little things, which were the newly hatched fish. He'd identified
bright orange bellies. You can see the swim bladder there as well. And now developing into little wild carp. Nice red bellies, full of artemia. One just have a little feed in there. Look.
So that's testament of Ben's brilliance, because things that he did that we would never have done was just know how these fish behave. And what he'd observed was the first few that hatch start gobbling up all the other eggs and eating the young fry. And so he was able to just move those new ones to one side to give the other ones a chance to hatch and grow, which we would have never done. So we might have ended up with 2 really big carp and not a lot else. But what Ben's done has got us a lot more than that. Another month went by and he sent us a new photo, slightly bigger again. And we love the fact that all of these are taken in pint glasses, by the way. We rate us toast each time. Then he sent us, this was beginning of October. So this is about a month ago, nearly. And you can see the different size there of fish. You've got that big one which hatched out at the beginning. There's the cannibal that ate all its brothers and sisters. And then there's the other ones as well. Okay, this is the latest photo, I believe. So you got Big Bertha there and the slightly smaller ones. And we think from those original 3 buckets of eggs that were taken up, which were probably, let's say 300 eggs, about half of them were either not fertilized or had a common fungal infection which kills the egg, and that's very common in the wild. So from, let's say he may have had 100 hatch, some of them were gobbled up by Big Bertha there to begin with. So we think at this point in time we've got about 70 fry, and that is by far and away more than we ever thought we'd get. When we first started out and think, if we could get some adult fish, if we could get 6, we'll be delighted, right? We've got perhaps 70, 50, 60, 70, it's difficult to count them, but way more than we thought we'd have, and they're all now of a size where they're less vulnerable than they have been in the past few months. They're already looking like classic wildies by my eye. I'm looking at the 2 on the left there, which have a much blunter head than I'm used to seeing in more king carp. Mouths are small. They look like wildies, and I'm dead keen to see how they grow and if indeed they look any different. That's Ben raising the toast as we do, and I've got to say, we'd had hoped to have Ben here at the moment, but he's flat out busy doing nettings and surveys of lakes in association with HS2, so he's flat out. He does send his regards, and that's Ben raising a toast to these little carp. So much so that we very much see like the future of these little fish in his hands, and that's one of those little carp, and they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And I think that's probably enough for me talking. What we wanted to do was give Ben the final say. So if you allow us, we'll play a little video of us talking to Ben. It was a really windy day, so apologies for the wind noise on the mic, but have a listen to what Ben has to say.
Right then, Ben, so what's been the process since taking delivery of the eggs?
Well, going back, how long are we going back now? June, was it?
July?
June, July?
Yeah.
You brought us some eggs to work with. Obviously, Fennel had explained months and months previously that you guys have been working on a pretty special project in getting the wild carp into a more sort of, not commercial scene, but bringing awareness to the old strains, the historic carp strains.
Yeah.
So Fennel asked if I'd be interested in raising some eggs, what that process would entail, and whether it was a doable project. So yeah, after many phone calls, we touched on the best ways of making that process happen, really.
Okay.
And yeah, getting the eggs to a point where they were hatched safely and then being raised in tanks to potentially be grown up to a size where they were safe to be stocked out into ponds where they were going to be, not being eaten by herons and cormorants and things like that.
So we're now at the beginning of October.
Yeah.
You've just shown me sort of 50 to 60 fry.
Yeah.
So what are your feeding patterns at the minute? How are you going about feeding?
So we're feeding them, at the start we fed them a zooplankton called Artemia, or brine shrimp. We hatch that up in a briny water. It takes 24 hours to 36 hours to hatch. When a carp fry hatches, it's so small, it's tiny, like an eyelash. Zooplankton is the best way of getting them feeding initially and getting them to grow as fast as possible. So we started on that for about 6 to maybe 10 days. And then a few weeks later we started introducing Daphnia, which is a small crustacean which they bulk up quite quickly on. And then we developed onto the crumb. Now they're an inch and a half. Some of them are still quite small, but we started with very, very few eggs. But yeah, now they're onto a crumble feed, like a high protein crumble feed, which has got all the nutrients and stuff in that they need to grow, really.
And what do you expect over the next sort of 6 to 12 months in terms of growth and also survival rate as well, I guess?
Well, survival rate wise now, once they get over an inch, they're okay. you know, they haven't got any predators because they're in a tank environment. Obviously, we can't put them out in ponds here because they're in a tank environment. They're very safe from predation. They don't grow as fast in tanks, unfortunately. You know, they need all that natural food around them all the time to grow really quickly. Whether they grow really quickly anyway, you know, historically the strain are quite small in size, quite slender, different type of shape to what we normally see in the commercial strains of carp available on the market. I wouldn't like to say on growth rates. I would like to say, you know, how big they're going to get, but generally with our strain of fish, you know, after a year you're looking at about £1.5 to £2.
That's the commercial strain.
Yeah, commercial strains. Yeah. So to be honest, in a tank environment, after a year, if we can get them up to sort of like 6 inches, 6, 7 inches, you know, I think, you know, we'd be happy with that. So
as we stand here in say in October, you're quite happy with how things are going, and you're sort of seeing it as a success at the minute?
I think so. I think for the amount, it was very difficult for you know, yourself and the other guys to obtain the eggs. So that was a difficulty. Was timing. Timing's crucial. You need to be there when they're spawning. You need to be there at the exact time, and you only get one go at it.
Yeah. So
we didn't start with a lot of eggs, and you know, there's a reason why carp lay 100,000 eggs per kilo of fish. There's very, very few make it through in the wild. So I think we're quite limited with the amount we've got and pushing through the bigger fish. Usually we'd have thousands of fish to work from, and we'd select a handful back and grow those on. But in this case, we're going to have to grow everything on we can and just see how far they go. Yeah. But, you know, survivability, they should be fine. It's just how quickly they get to the stage you want them to get at over the next couple of years.
Brilliant, great. Well, from the Wild Carp Trust, we just want to say a huge thank you for everything that you've done here at 5 Star Fisheries, and we'll hopefully see you, let's say, early next year, spring next year for another update. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much, Ben.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Mostly, we want to thank him and you for the achievements that we've had this year. We've kept them under wraps on purpose, as you can imagine, little fragile fish, but we're super proud now. We will share this beyond you guys, so everybody gets to see what we've achieved. But it's a huge tick in the box of everything that we wanted to achieve, and it gives us confidence as well, and all the news stories that we wanted to go and say, we're here, I'm in business, and we're doing some great things with these fish. And part of the Q&A, we can tell you the next steps, next stories, if you wish. So Andy, I'm kind of done, mate. I'm happy to open this up to any questions that we've got. I think we're slightly ahead of schedule, are we? Quarter an hour.
Yeah, we're okay. Yeah,
we're all right for time.
So people should be able to unmute themselves now. If you want to sort of join in and chat, feel free to ask any questions that you've got, make any comments. I've got a question actually, Fennel, just to kick things off. It has been a really steep learning curve for us all this past year or so. So from your perspective, what would you do differently, perhaps next year?
I wouldn't spend a week up to my chest in water, I know that. It's funny, you know, we genuinely went into this with an approach that says disturb the adult fish as minimal. If no disturbance at all, that's happy days for us, and all we need to do is touch some eggs, and that's all that's needed. But it is such an inefficient way of collecting eggs, particularly in an environment where these eggs are getting eaten by minnows. If I was doing it again, I would probably do it more conventionally and say, okay, I'd wait till the fish are getting ready to spawn, and then I might net a few adults and strip them of eggs. I did kind of like the romance of knowing that these eggs were spawned in the wild, but the reality is we only got 200 or 300 of them. If we'd stripped fish of eggs and milt, we would have got hundreds of thousands. That would be probably learning number one. The second learning probably would be not to go for them in June, but instead go back to the water September, October time with the crayfish traps again and try and get some of the 2-inch long fish. That might be the one. But all that said and done, it was blooming good fun. You know, the fact that I was more keen to get up to Ben's and take the eggs up on the 16th of June than I was to go fishing. I loved it. We just had a great time.
Yeah. And what do you make of Ben's observations so far then? On he's not said an awful lot, but he's sort of said to me that you know, they are going to grow relatively slowly because they're not in a natural environment. So drawing any conclusions sort of thus far is really difficult. But have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, we're trying not to become fish farmers, and we're a conservation charity, not a business. And what Ben has said is, by keeping them in these tanks, they will not grow as quick as they would do out in a stew pond, because they're only getting fed when he feeds them. And if it were to overfeed them, the water would get polluted, if that's the right term. So he's been advising us on, could we source some stock ponds or dig some stock ponds into which we could put these fish sooner, you know, in a netted pool, and that way they would grow a lot quicker. We then have to consider our availability to be there to feed them and keep an eye on them. His advice regarding the early stages was crucial, I think. That those early growths and separating those first couple of fish that would have eaten everything, we'd have never done that. Dave's got a question.
Yeah, hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you great, Dave.
Yeah, cool. So if it's not giving away too many secrets, what's the ultimate aim for these fish, for starters, and subsequent ones? Presumably you're looking at seeding other waters, or are you looking at essentially just bolstering the stock of the waters that already exist?
No, I mean, it's almost one of those long-term visions. The vision we had was take these fish and get them into our conservation pool, which we call cowslip pool, which will give us a new donor water, and we're hoping that they'll grow on in there and they'll spawn on their own, or we can then manually strip some more fish. And then the population grows. Classic Carp project, they go in 2 by 2 in small numbers, and then the population grows. We know that we're going to end up with surplus fish because one pool can't sustain too many. And at that point, the intention is to identify the correct waters where they can go into. Now, at the moment, Pantaclean was quite surprising actually how many fish are in there, including some quite big wildies, so 8-10 pounders, which we'd heard rumours of, but hadn't seen up close until the spawnings. So number one plan is into cowslip pool, and they're there protected. They're there then if anything terrible did happen to the original stock in Pantaclean, and could then go to reseed their donor water. As and when we get surplus stock, yes, the intention is to hopefully make them available to other waters. We'd be quite strict on what waters they could go into. We don't want them going into other waters where there are other types of carp, and the strain could get screwed. But I think it would be most appropriate perhaps to engage with the likes of English Heritage or National Trust to say, you've got some very historic waters that may have had carp in the past, few moats perhaps, haven't got them in it anymore, or you may be looking to stock with fish. Wouldn't it be great if they are like period appropriate? You know, they do it with plants, you know, heritage rose gardens you see all the time, don't you? They don't put modern roses in them. Why wouldn't they do the same with fish? So that is definitely the goal. I've just had a text from Ben, by the way. He's just got through the door. He'd really hoped to be here, but he should join, really. Did that answer your question, Dave, in terms of?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, it just gives us a bit more feel for the sort of direction and how the scope's going to broaden. going forward.
The dream is
it's exciting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the dream is that more people know about them, care about them, love them, want to conserve them. We're mindful that, as with a lot of these fishery water conservation stuff, it's a lot of anglers who care most about the fish and the water quality and all that stuff. So we'd imagine a lot of these fish might end up in waters that are being fished. But equally, it would be great to be able to find farmers who would like to have a conservation pool to protect them, landowners who might have ponds that aren't fished but would be most suitable for the survival of these fish. And I go back to the Avon Roach project, and there have been times where I thought that the most secure place that I could keep these is in a garden pond, because there's not going to be an otter get through my garden fence, you know. That sort of thought as well. But in the wild is where we want to see them, really. Theo, you've got a question?
Yes, thanks, Hannel. First of all, fantastic work, guys. That seemed like a real labour of love just to get those first eggs, and a huge learning curve too. And I was just going to ask, what are the kind of timescales on this now? For example, what kind of age are you planning to release the babies out into the wild? Because, well, I have to say I know more about trout than I know about carp, but certainly from a point of view of trout, the longer you keep them in the sort of fish farm environment, the less suited they become to life in the wild, if you like. So I'm just curious what the timings on that are. And then a completely dumb question: what age do they have to get to before they start spawning in their own right? So what's the kind of generation length for the forward planning, if you like?
Yeah, okay, so in terms of timelines, it could be a couple of years before we put these fish out. They need to get big enough to be cormorant proof. If we can build a stock pool that we can net, they could go out earlier. I think the stock pool is probably the way, so that we can get them growing quicker in a protected environment. And what obviously that will allow us to do is continue to source more fish next year and the year after, both from Pantaclin to get new generations through into the programme, but also looking at other waters as well.
Fantastic. Great stuff, good guys. And I do very much like your idea of finding heritage locations to put the fish into as part of not exactly a historical reenactment, but fish appropriate to the old moats or ancient lakes or whatever you can find. Fantastic.
I think, Fennel, you've hinted at this already. I think that you identify immediately 3 areas, Pantaclin, Llangwyn and Chiddingstone as 3 areas. I'm sure there are probably others dotted around the United Kingdom somewhere. But if as the years go by, one is able to take stock from those 3 differing sources and perhaps more, clearly we would want to keep those stock in separate areas so you don't mix heritage strains, I guess is point 1. Yeah. Point 2 is I actually didn't realize we had 60 to 70 fry thriving away there with Ben, so that was great news. That's thank you for telling me that. So the third point really is a rhetorical one. It's incumbent, I would imagine, on all of us to see if we can begin to identify those slightly out of the way remote places that may exist in the country. And I happen to live just on the edge of Exmoor as an example, which is relatively remote. There are many other areas, Yorkshire and obviously Wales. So over the years, we can start to identify those and potentially populate them, because, you know, we've all read that there's a degree of irony with this, which is that wild carp thrive on neglect in some respects. And so there's almost a contradiction that we need to be careful of, that in publicising the heritage strain, that we don't somehow become a victim of our own success. So there is a slight contradiction, which I think we need to be cautious of, shall we say?
Slightly, and so I think first of all, it's definitely baby steps, the tiniest baby steps we can possibly do to get the right successes and not get ahead of ourselves. The comment you made about other waters is correct. This is about having the individual strains. So never the strain shall meet, or whatever the term we should use. So for eggs or fry from other waters, we need new conservation pools, new stock pools on farms, in dedicated facilities, wherever, but they should be far enough apart so that they don't mix. So that's one of our challenges, and that is a dependency we have on other landowners being identified or coming forward. Yeah. Working with maybe the National Trust might be a way forward, in that they may have waters ready to go. The bit about neglect is a key one. So I think human neglect very often benefits these carp. We've seen it on remote waters in Wales that we fish, in Devon, in Cornwall. Even some little garden ponds or farm ponds have these things in them. Proving the age of them is difficult, but they're very often wildies. My possible counter argument is that the landscapes, or the environmental landscape, in the last years, particularly otters and cormorants and others, and the growing trend for king carp, that a lot of these waters are stocked, sometimes naively, with a different strain, and which often affects the original strain. So neglect is good as long as they're left alone by not just people but by predators as well, in which case they do often thrive. But what is wrong with taking a backup stock, really? And I know there are different conservation techniques. Some people like the idea of others don't. Others like to see them only in the wild. Between the two, and probably an angling equivalent of that is a lake with an otter fence around it. Yeah. But just in principle, giving the fish a plan B. So if the source water is devastated by whatever means, that strain exists somewhere else and can be then reintroduced or survives. That has to be a good thing. And given that we're a new charity, a little charity fledgling, that's probably enough for us right now. I think that the dream would be a bigger network, both of donor waters, conservation fish farms, and maybe, we're talking about longer term stuff. If these fish are best in the wild, then the best place for them is to look after them where they are anyway. But that requires a degree of influence that we don't always have. Very often it's an angling club has them, or a landowner has them. They don't know what they've got. And that's part of our education goal, to make them appreciate what is there, so that they don't think, oh, they're just little stunted carp, let's get rid of those and put some king carp in, for example. Yeah. So by leasing waters or owning waters, we can then control them and allow the correct access to people who appreciate them.
I see Stephen has got his hand up, so I can just finally say I can see a resurgence maybe in the interest in becoming Cistercian monks, and maybe we can create our own stock ponds, who knows.
It is, yes. Yeah. Thank you. In a way, you've answered my question, really. It was something I hadn't thought of until tonight. The fish, for example, in Panty Lyn, physically are different to the fish in other waters, and it hadn't really crossed my mind that maybe there shouldn't be that cross-contamination, which will eventually dilute all these differences, and we end up with one sort of generic feral carp or wild carp or whatever you want to call it. But then does that mean we're going to have specific sanctuaries or stock ponds for each carp, each strain of carp we take from particular waters. Because obviously the implication there is we're going to have to source lots of waters in which to keep these different fish.
Mm. So why you're a trustee, Steve?
Well, I know.
Landowner relationship.
Yeah, it's only just dawned on me. I am a little bit
well
slow
volunteered. It's absolutely true, and I don't know if anyone. One of the other news items we got for you is the blogs live as well now. So we're starting to put some blogs on there, and the conservation blogs will be going on soon. But one of the blogs we put on there is about it's the strain that we're looking to consider, not just individual fish. And I was contacted about a year ago by somebody who'd heard, maybe less than about, someone who heard one of the podcasts we've done. And he said, listen, I don't know what all the fuss is about. You're just talking about a feral fish that is reverting through successive generations in the wild. So even if these precious fish that you care about now are annihilated, all we have to do is wait another 400 or 700 years and we'd have the same feel of fish again. And that absolutely is not what we're about. Because my reaction to it was, well, in 700 years time, the fish that got wiped out would be, let's say, 1400 years old. So they'd be even older, even rarer, and even more precious. So it's the age of the strain that is really of interest here, and proving that age is difficult. You can tell a little bit by the look of the fish, but it's dodgy grounds. But it's the individual strain and the age of those strains that we're looking to conserve. So, yeah,
lots of ponds.
The operation has to grow.
We have had people reach out to us. Landowners have reached out to us already with opportunities and interest in stocking these fish. We had a guy email last week saying that he was a landowner and he had a couple of ponds that were recently not approved, and one of them is potentially suitable. So there are opportunities out there. We just need to follow them up and sort of probably do a little bit more promotion to make more of that.
If you have someone who has a pond, I mean, how many fish would that pond need to hold to produce a viable breeding, sustainable population, do you think? Do we know? You know, the reality is a garden pond probably isn't going to be big enough to sustain a population, but what is the smallest surface of water that we need and the smallest number of fish to actually make it viable?
Yeah, that's a good point. Theo,
I don't know.
You've got your hand up again?
Yes, if it's okay for me to ask another question. Leading on from the point about the individual strains from individual waters, does anybody know whether the existing individual strains are likely to have essentially become micro-adapted to the conditions in the waters where they are now? I mean, carp, I think, are supposed to be pretty adaptable and able to survive anywhere. So maybe that is another thought. But certainly, the conditions up at Panty Lynn, for example, look like at some points of the year they might become pretty extreme, and so your population of carp is adapted to survive there, and so may have characteristics that suit it to inhabit an upland linn with extremes of temperature, and they might not actually like a more temperate lowland pond, if you like. Any thoughts?
I think you're right.
and it's particularly nice in Devon.
It's a really good point, and it's worth studying as well. And we've seen different behaviours of the fish there, environmental, different looks and shapes. Interestingly, on Pantaclin, I'd read an academic scientific paper that suggests it's too high and too cold for trout to survive, which as an angler I think is nonsense.
Yeah.
But they'd recorded temperatures of minus 19 there, and the water almost totally freezing up.
Well, they're in Kashmir, I can tell you that.
Yeah. And the Pantaclin fish are predominantly predatory. I think that the minnows are their main food source.
Just go back to that point that was raised about almost, I hate to use the phrase, I can't think of a better one, stocking levels. Effectively, I suppose it comes down to what's the optimum level of fish per acreage or so of cubic volume of water. Is it crude of me to suggest that looking at these sort of rates and calculations they use for koi carp, for example, might be a start point? I don't know if that may be misleading, but there are kind of calculations there, aren't they, about stocking levels and pounded of fish per volume of gallon volume of water. I don't know if that's relevant or not.
I don't know. Is Bruno still on the call? Have we got Bruno be able to advise us?
No, he's not on anymore, Phil.
Got now, okay.
Yeah, I was saying there's plenty of information out there, and surely the commercial breeders, well, their information would provide a suitable baseline. Obviously, there are going to be fine nuances, as Theo's suggested, you know, with different strains. But ultimately, the stocking levels, the baseline information isn't going to be vastly dissimilar from other fish and from other carp. There's plenty of stuff going back, you know, a couple of 100 years of carp culture throughout Europe. So I don't think it's going to be a biggie to drop on that baseline information as a guideline, and then refine that as the findings come in, you know, and as further information comes in from the stock ponds.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben has already advised us. I just can't remember what it was. He's advised on optimum biomass and richness of water and food and all that stuff. So it's one of those things that's been a while off, because it's maybe 2 years away from us putting our fish in that environment. But certainly from a research perspective, will get us prepared for it. I'm conscious we're perhaps almost time up, actually. Is there any final last questions before we do close? So what I'll say is I started with a thank you, I'll end with a thank you. It's been you guys who've inspired us as much as anything to keep doing this. Started as an idea about 8 years ago. We've had some fantastic progress this year with the Pantaclin successes, the cowslip pool successes, the fish farming successes. It's just been genuinely amazing, and we will share this with a broader audience over the coming weeks, but you got it first. If there's any further information you want or any pictures you want, just reach out to us, we can supply them. If there's anything you can help us do to spread the word, please do so. Nothing's embargoed now, we can go and chat about it. And our intention is to do another one of these in about 6 months' time, give you an update, not just on the fish, but all the other activities we're doing. And then, subject to COVID, we're looking forward to having some sort of get together as well, symposium type thing, and to get out there at some of the shows as well to talk to folk about wildies. So a huge thank you all round, and for attending tonight as well. And I think that's me done, Andy.
Yeah, I think we ought to just say thanks to Fennel for presenting this on this first occasion. There's a lot of work gone behind the scenes to bring this all together. A few technical glitches at the very beginning, but I know Fennel's done an awful lot of work to prepare for tonight and drive the whole trust forward. So thank you for your enthusiasm, Fennel, for keeping everybody and everything going. It's all appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thanks to it's a team effort, collective effort. Andy, thank you for. I couldn't have done this tonight without you guys, and it's a long way to continue. We're doing some fantastic stuff, and I think 6 months' time will be as different again. And really exciting.
Thank you, Fennel. Certainly proud to be a part of this going forward. legacy, I think, for many of us.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for
Right,
joining.
thank you.
Well, chaps. Yeah, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thanks.